Welcome to Coffee Time Again, Exposing the Truth. Dale at the microphone. The show that shows how history is repeating itself. I go back in time and the past to show what happened and what is going on now. Most of the time, I'm not talking about the news of the day. I will, though, if it comes out to be important, I will. The culture that forgets its history has no future. A history buff and love to talk about it. I'm a constitutional conservative and a devout Christian. I follow the path in history to where it goes and then relate it to today to reveal the connections. I have gone back as far as the Greeks, the Egyptians, as far back as Ayub, if you remember him, and as close and as early as 2010. So grab your chair, your coffee, sit and listen to today's show. Today's guest, Spencer Bashins, has a master's degree from the London School of Economics, a law degree from the Florida State University. After law school, he worked in the private sector for 2 years prior to joining the Social Security Administration, SSA, in 2010. He worked at the Appeals Council for almost 4 years, reviewing thousands of disability decisions for compliance with SSA's complex rules and procedures. Then he worked in the hearing level for 7 years, where he drafted almost 2,000 decisions for the SSA Administrative Law Judges. After working at SSA for more than 10 years, he wanted to help demystify the complicated disability system. His first book, Social Security Disability Revealed: Why It is So Hard to Access Benefits and What Can Be Done About It, explores the obstacles that disability claimants face as they try to access the benefits they deserve. Because I believe that Social Security is not an entitlement. How you doing, Spencer? Glad to see you today.
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. So Social Security is not an entitlement. Do you think that?
I actually disagree with that. We'll jump right into a disagreement.
Yeah,
I think I like the word entitlement, but not in the context that we typically hear it. Normally that's used in a more disparaging way, but I like it in the literal sense. When you pay into a program, you know, a Social Security tax is taken out of your paycheck with the promise that it will be there for you if you qualify when you need it.
Right.
I think you're then entitled to receive it. It doesn't seem very fair to have to pay in the tax, and then when you think you're entitled to it, gone.
Yeah.
So no, I like the word entitlement.
From that perspective, from the proper definition, I agree with you on that. So that's not a disagreement.
Okay.
Think about them.
Well, that works then. Yeah.
Yeah, because you got to define your terms. You got to look at the dictionary sometimes to figure out what does the word really mean. And we know both know that over the years the meaning of words have changed.
True. Yeah.
So
but I think the whole point of the program when it was set up in the 1930s was to provide some guarantee for people, right? Because that was a time during the Great Depression after the 1929 stock market crash when people didn't have a guarantee. You could leave money under a mattress, your house could burn down. Or you could put it in the stock market and the stock market could figuratively burn down.
Yeah.
And so it was set up for a place where, okay, you pay, we're going to make promises both ways. You promise to pay into this program and we promise there will be something for you later on. And that's how pensions work, right?
Yep.
You wouldn't work for a company for 30 years. Imagine if in the 1960s, when most every American had a pension, if you got to retirement age and they said, we've now decided no pension for you.
Yeah.
That's just not fair. So yeah, I think if you qualify for the benefit, then you're entitled to receive it.
Okay. I agree with that statement from that way. So we both know that getting Social Security can be difficult.
Yeah.
I got my original Social Security disability in 2006 because I was disabled and couldn't work at the time. I still am, I still can, but I'm older too.
Right.
At 65, it switched over to automatically to Social Security.
To retirement.
Right, to retirement.
Yeah.
Is that a normal behavior?
Yeah. Yeah. So there are two programs, Social Security Disability Insurance, which I gather is what you had. That's the Title II program. And that's the program that we think of when we think about Social Security. That tax on your pay stub that is OASDI, which is, this is not a great name. I apologize. I didn't come up with the name, but OASDI is Old Age Survivors and Disability Insurance. It should be Retirement Survivors and Disability, right? But that tax goes to fund all three of those programs. So if you have disability benefits, when you reach full retirement age, they just convert to retirement benefits. The other program is SSI, Supplemental Security Income, and that's not based on paying in the Social Security tax. That's just funded by general revenues, regular income taxes that we all pay in. And that's the asset and income-based program. Some people use the term welfare. I don't like the term welfare because you still have to qualify by being found disabled. But that's a different program. So if you have SSI, you just stay on SSI. But the regular SSDI, the Social Security Disability Insurance benefits, when you reach full retirement age, those just convert automatically.
Are you in a position to say whether or not, because they keep hearing from Congress and when they're running for office, especially as they are now, that Social Security is going broke. We're going to run out of money by 2023. Or whatever,
and the thing,
whatever year.
And the thing about the way our Congress was designed from the very beginning, of course, is that they're always running for re-election, right? The House is every 2 years.
Right.
So there's never a time when they're not in election mode, which is different in other countries where they have an election and the parliament lasts 4 or 5 years. So they have a chance to govern and then a short election cycle. Members of Congress are always running for re-election. So they're always talking politics. Everything is turned political.
Right.
And of course, Social Security is one of those programs. It may be the #1 program to be politicized because I believe it is larger than DOD. I think it is the largest portion of the federal budget, but it's also just the most polarizing, which is weird because we all pay into the system, right? You think it wouldn't be that polarizing. But as far as, well, Social Security is going to run out of money, I obviously am not a member of Congress, I work for a member of Congress, I'm not part of the Social Security Board of Trustees, but I can tell you from what I know, that's totally wrong. Social Security is not going to run out of money. And the reason is that when people make loaded assumptions like that, it's based on assuming certain things will never change. But all you have to do is make very minor tweaks to the program. And because the program is so big, we're talking, I believe it's around $1 trillion of the federal budget every year. And that's for the beneficiaries and to administer the program. But because it's so big, you make a minor tweak and it has a lot of zeros. Just as an example, for me, the full retirement age is 67. For some of my family members, it's 66. For you, it may have been 65. So just making this minor tweak where we say, okay, we're going to make people work just a tiny bit longer, or even if they're not working, we're going to delay their access to benefits for just a tiny little bit, 1 year out of your whole life. And that could make massive changes and make the program solvent for decades. So that's just one example. There are other examples where one other good one is every year the cap on income for the Social Security tax goes up a little bit. Not too long ago, it was like $110,000. I think now it's like $130,000.
Okay.
Right. So even though it's just a little increase, that's every working American who's in that income bracket is now paying more Social Security tax. Well, again, more Social Security tax times tens of millions of people buffers the system. So it'll be fine. Tweaks will need to be made. There will need to be adjustments like I talked about. They may need to adjust the benefits and bring them down a little bit just to keep the program solvent. But the program is doing just fine.
Okay. Thank you for doing that. I'm sure my listeners are going to be very, very happy to hear the Social Security when they get there, because a lot of my listeners are younger people,
right?
In their 30s, not even thinking about retirement yet, and they should be.
Well, and I will say this, even though the program will be fine for the foreseeable future, it's also really, as you know, it's really not something to depend on. So at my age, for example, I'm just assuming there won't be Social Security, not because there won't be, but because, as you know, as a recipient, it's just not very much money.
No, it's not.
So I don't want to have to rely on that. So for me, for my family, our planning is that we'll probably have Social Security, but we're just not factoring it in our retirement plan. Does that make sense? So
Well,
we're setting money aside in our retirement, and
yeah,
if it's there, great, and it probably will be, but it's also the kind of thing where, and I know a lot of Americans aren't able to save because they're just are not earning enough. But for people who can, it's also good to be planning to supplement Social Security.
that's what I meant by my listeners at 30 need to be paying attention to their retirement now.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think it was Albert Einstein who said that compound interest was the eighth wonder of the world. I'm pretty sure that's Einstein.
I'm pretty sure it was.
And yeah, I mean, if you're 30 and you're that 30 years between now and age 60, it's mind-boggling how valuable today's dollar is compared to those dollars that Social Security is going to give you at 67.
Right.
I mean, today's dollar is so much more valuable because it's going to be worth 20 times just in compound growth.
Yeah.
What that dollar you'll get at age 67 will be.
Right. I think it's a great thing there. You were talking when we had our pre-interview that the regulations are there for a reason.
Yeah.
And they're complicated. And you have a plan, or you talked about a plan to not circumvent them, but work with
to modernize the system. Well, first, you just brought up something that I'd really like to get into, because like the myth of Social Security going bankrupt, this is another thing that people talk about because it's so politically charged, but it's not really true. And that is, politicians love to talk about regulations. There's too many regulations. There's not enough regulation. Well, federal regulations are actually quite boring, right? Congress passes a law, and then a federal agency has to pass a set of regulations, which are really just rules and framework for how to implement that system. And some people are familiar with the IRS has a lot of regulations because Congress will pass a tax law, and then the IRS has to issue guidance with here's how we're actually going to implement it so you know what to do in your tax return, right? Well, every federal agency does that. Social Security is no different. So there are very complex regulations, but that's how Social Security administers the program and how they're able to administer a program that's over $1 trillion a year, right? There have to be rules and a framework so that Social Security's employees know what they're doing and how to administer the system and how to answer questions and how to have cases move through the system. Because when it comes to disability, we're talking over 1 million applicants a year, and the average case stays in the system for a couple years. So at any one time, there's over 2 million people currently in the disability system at some stage of the process. That is an enormous amount of claims, right? So Social Security has to have an enormous amount of employees, but also really good framework for how to deal with each case at each step of the process so that they can keep the cases flowing. The average claimant has to wait around a year for a hearing. It used to be 2 years. And people think like, why am I waiting so long? What are those lazy employees doing? Of course, it's not that Social Security employees are lazy. It's that there's just so many cases that the line just backs up, right? And everyone has to wait. So those regulations are there for a reason. So anyone who thinks like, there's too many regulations, let's just start cutting regulations. The problem with that is every regulation, even though there are thousands of them, everyone does something and is there for a reason. So you can't just start like taking a machete and cutting regulations. You have to think about what you're doing and why. But having said all that, as you pointed out, it's not a really efficient system. All those regulations do cause a lot of red tape, a lot of slowdowns in the system. Any benefits program that forces people to, where people pay into it and are told it'll be there, but then forces those people to essentially beg for those benefits, is just inefficient, because someone has to apply. They then have to go see medical sources, get that evidence. And I'm sure, as you and your listeners know, getting medical evidence in a very 20th century medical records keeping system like we have in the United States isn't easy. It's not like France, where you have a card that is kind of like our driver's license. It's got a card, it's got a barcode, and any medical facility in the entire country can scan it and get your entire medical record instantly. We don't have that in the United States. So
No.
you have to go to individual doctors, and oftentimes they'll print them out for you or say, we'll fax them to you, right? It's so all these barriers are put up. I have a barrier to have to apply. I have a barrier to fill out all that information. If I have a mental health impairment, I might not be able to do that. I then have to go get all this treatment. I then have to get all my records, make sure there are no gaps, get everything organized, get it to Social Security. And then even if I've done all that, I might not meet the definition of disability, which is actually quite strict, because you have to show that you can't do any work that exists in significant numbers in the national economy. So yeah, the law really is stacked against claimants. So we're told it's an entitlement. Don't worry, if you need it, it'll be there for you. But then we make it incredibly difficult for people who are facing significant medical challenges to then access those benefits that they were promised earlier when they were working and paying the tax. So I do think the system could use a wholesale modernization, not just Social Security, disability, but all of the public benefits, where someone has to, in a very, it's really demeaning and demoralizing to have to ask for something that you think you should just have. And so all of the programs in the federal government where you have to apply and beg for something when you're already having a really difficult time, I think all of those programs could use a modernization.
Yeah, a friend of my mother, and mine too, but a friend of my mother, there was a Social Security office in California today, this morning, earlier, trying to get his Social Security after his mother passed away. Get it back, because he was being paid by them to be his mother's caregiver. But that's
Right.
his mother died. Now he's got to get it on his own. And they're having a devil of a time doing it because of the stuff you're talking about. Trying to get all his medical stuff and his paperwork together and stuff. So
Yeah, and the system is designed to be difficult. That's the thing. It's not an accident. It's not like, oh, well, it's a shame. Maybe Congress will get around to fixing it. The thing is that the saying we hope Congress gets around to fixing it has an assumption built into that statement that this sort of accidentally happened this way. It didn't. The system is very intentionally designed to have people paying in, make it really easy to pay in, right? You work, you're a W-2 employee, you don't have to send a check. We just withhold that money out of your paycheck. We make it really easy to pay in and really difficult for you to get that money out. And it's not a loophole. People love to use the word for a variety of things with the federal government and the taxing system. People will say loophole. Oh, it's a loophole. Like they just forgot about it. If something was really a loophole, Congress could change it in a week.
yeah,
But these things that we think of as loopholes, they're not loopholes. They've been deliberately designed that way. And with regard to Social Security disability, my opinion is that it's designed this way because the disabled community, it's like the last bastion of acceptable discrimination in the United States. If we see someone who is a wheelchair user, maybe we'll let them park in the front of the parking lot. But that's kind of it. There's a lot of impairments that are non-visible, that are mental health impairments, and we just don't, American society just doesn't treat those people as disabled. And so of course we're going to make it really difficult for those people to access disability benefits.
Okay, that's a societal thing that's come about over the course of time. Is that what am I reading you right on that?
Can you say that one more time?
Yeah, it's kind of like it's, what did I say? Put together that way over the period of time, because it is the last bastion of discrimination.
Yeah, I think that if we viewed discrimination against the disabled community in the same way that we felt about discrimination based on race or gender, for example, there's no way we would still have this program, because there are so many people who have a medical condition and cannot work or cannot work full time. And there's so many people who have a medical condition and a family member has to be a caregiver and take care of them. And so that person can't work. And our program, you know, we don't have mandatory sick leave in this country. So this sums it up here. I saw a quote recently that said something like, I've never seen someone pretend to be sick to get out of work, but I've seen lots of people pretend not to be sick so they don't get fired.
Right.
And the reason I love that quote is it really shows our priorities. Our priority is not health. It's not taking care of people. It's not caring for family members. It's suck it up and go to work.
Yeah.
And we've just had that culture for so long that that's acceptable. It's acceptable to pretend not to be sick so you can get to work, but it's not acceptable if you actually are sick to say that out loud.
Yeah. You know, when I remember that being that way when I was first starting out working back in the 60s, 70s, that, you know, it was okay to be sick and go to work, but you didn't necessarily have to tell anyone, but don't dare call in sick. And when I became a manager of restaurants over the years, you know, I was kind of lenient with them, but not in every case. You know, you're faking it to come in when they were actually sick.
And that culture really hasn't changed, has it?
Oh.
So, you know, if you're not going to come to, there's a lot of jobs and a lot of people in the United States where they're paid hourly. If they don't go to work, they don't get paid, and they might be fired because the employer might say, if you're not going to come in, I'll find someone else who will.
Right.
And it's sad that that's just the culture that we have. And because that's the general culture that we have, that culture, of course, informs our laws. And that's really what we have with the disability system. You're fine. You can go to work. You don't need disability benefits. So you pay in your whole working life. And then when you need it, you're told you don't really need it.
Yeah. But, you know, you were talking about the universal payer system. Explain a little bit about that.
Right. So
we disagreed on that earlier.
So the problem with having this, I have to apply, prove myself, beg for benefits, lose, appeal. The problem with that system is there are just so many barriers. There's no barrier to paying in, but there's so many barriers. If you are truly sick or injured, if you have a medical condition and you can't work, there's so many barriers to claiming the benefits that, going back to what we talked about at the beginning, that you think you're entitled to. And so a great way to fix that whole problem is just get rid of the system and have a system where we don't make people apply for benefits. We just give people benefits. We just do a universal payment to every American adult every month. This was something a couple of years ago during the presidential campaign that Andrew Yang talked about, a universal basic income, a UBI, where he was saying we should just give every American $1,000. And a lot of the critics of that program say, well, it's too expensive. How would we pay for it? But that's actually a really, really simple thing to answer. And that is, if you take all of the benefits that we currently give out to people, including things that you have to apply for, but don't look like public benefits because they're not stigmatized, like the mortgage interest deduction on your taxes. That's a public benefit. You claim that deduction and the government sends you a check or a direct deposit. So that's a benefit, just like other benefits.
Yeah.
It's just not stigmatized in the same way because there's a different economic class of people who are claiming that benefit versus needing WIC benefits or SNAP benefits, right? Food stamp. So, but if you take all the benefits and you pool them and you distribute that money to every working American, it's almost $1,000.
Yeah.
And that's not even factoring the fact that you could then reduce the federal workforce by a substantial amount, because all the people who are there to review Social Security disability claims, you wouldn't need them anymore. People wouldn't have to apply for disability benefits. And so everyone has illness or injury at some point in their lives, right?
Right.
Any human with a body and a mind is going to have medical impairments at some point, and it's going to be difficult to work. So if we just acknowledge that and we say, everyone's going to need these benefits at some point, why do we have such an expensive apply and approve system when we could just, in a much cheaper way, give everyone the money? We'd have a much smaller federal government. And then if and when something does happen, you're not going to become homeless. You can still pay your rent. You can still buy food. It's not like it would disincentivize people to work. It's $1,000 a month, right?
Right.
All it's doing is preventing you from becoming homeless, starving, and you can keep the lights on. Like, you're not going to live a life of luxury.
No.
But it's going to help you keep the basics in place so that you can focus on treatment and returning to work.
Okay. What happens under that system? What happens when somebody reaches retirement age, say 67 as it is now?
Yeah, so we'd have to think about how to reform. The other two things along with that, obviously, our retirement system and our healthcare system. Because if we have an expensive healthcare system where we're wasting a lot of money there too, people can't get the treatment they need, then they can't return to work to keep paying taxes to pay for the UBI, right?
Right.
So it would also be great if, in conjunction with the UBI, we had a universal healthcare system, which would be way cheaper and help people get the care they need. So maybe they never fall out of the workforce to start with, but if they do, they can get treatment and get back into the workforce so that they can keep paying taxes to pay for the UBI. And as far as retirement goes, there's several different options. You could just have the people keep collecting the UBI past their retirement age and decide that's just their retirement. That's replacing the whole Social Security system. You could also supplement through a different tax that's only a retirement tax. You could privatize it and tell people you've got 40 years to plan for your retirement, do it yourself. Or you could do what we do today, which is a combination of those things, right? We have, when I was working for the federal government, I had a 3-tier retirement.
Yeah.
I paid into Social Security, but I also paid into a pension, federal government pension. And I also had the thrift savings plan, which is the federal government version of a 401k.
Right.
So probably a combination program makes the most sense, because then you're doing a public program, an employment-based program, but also a privatized program.
What we need is some definite, and I agree with you on that, is the definite healthcare system. Because I battle it all the time.
Yeah, and none of these are new. That's the other
No.
thing is we think in the United States, oh, we have to reinvent the wheel every time, but none of this is new. Europe has every country in Europe has a healthcare system that is more public than ours. And
Yes.
most of Europe have fully public, single-payer healthcare systems that provide much better care to way more people at a significantly reduced cost. But also parts of Europe have a UBI, some type of UBI, like we do. The UK experimented with a universal payment about a decade ago. I know in Germany, their unemployment system is very different, so that if there's a recession, instead of a lot of people becoming unemployed, people can become half employed, and the government helps with that. And that's great, because even if you're half employed, that means you can still pay for the basics, right?
Right.
And that means you can make your housing payment, and then you don't have a housing crash, a mortgage crash, because no one's paying their mortgages. So there are better ways to do things that other countries know how to do. It's just that in the United States, we haven't had the political will yet to demand members of Congress implement these systems.
In my phone, I get a lot of news reports and breaking news stories and stuff like this. And several, not recently, but in the last month, past 30 days, there was a lot of them coming out of the UK saying this hospital is overloaded, this hospital can't take any more patients, this hospital's.
Yeah.
So they're having that kind of problem in the UK. I don't know where.
So here's the thing. That's true. I'm not going to say that's not true. Countries with public healthcare systems do have waiting lists for a variety of things. It happens in Canada too, even though they have a provincial-based system. It's still a public system, and this does happen. And that's a fair point. But that's not the end of the argument. That's always the first thing people jump to who want to criticize a public system is, oh yeah, but there are waiting lists. Two things though. First, the waiting list is based on need. So if you have an emergency, like if you're brought in by an ambulance and you need life-saving care, that's why there's a waiting list for other people, because they put you straight into the CAT scan machine. It's based on need. So every healthcare system has to prioritize. The difference is public systems prioritize, they ration the care based on need. And in the United States, we do it based on ability to pay.
Yeah.
So if I have great insurance, and if I can pay for an MRI the next day, even if it's just a diagnostic MRI for possibly an elective procedure, I can get into an MRI center and get in an MRI machine the next day because I can pay for that privilege. In the UK, they might say, you got to wait 3 months. It's an elective procedure. You don't need it. There are people who need it. So every system is rationing. That's the important thing to remember. So how do we want to ration? Do we want to ration based on need, which considers all members of our society and puts the people who need it the most first? Or do we want to say, you don't need it, but you can afford it. So you go to the front of the line. This other person really, really needs it, but they can't afford it. So they're in the back of the line. And very likely, if you have enough people in the back of the line, many of them will die.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So yes, there is some rationing based on need in the UK and Canada and other countries, but their outcomes are also much, much better because of the fact that they're rationing based on who needs it the most.
Their cancer recovery rate's about twice what ours is in the UK.
Every number is better in the UK. That's the thing, is it's not that there aren't some British people or some Canadians or people from other countries who come to the United States for care. Yes, some people who can afford it will come to the United States for care. Some people in the UK, actually, there's a not insignificant number of people in the UK who buy private health insurance because they have the NHS for emergencies, but they don't want to wait 3 months. So they'll buy private health insurance so that if they need an MRI, they can get it sooner. That does exist. There is a private health insurance market in the UK.
I knew there was.
But if you ask 1,000 Canadians and 1,000 Brits, how many do you think, if you ask them, would you rather have our system or the American system?
Well, they want their system.
They want their system.
Yeah.
I watched a show once where they went around and asked British people, how much do you think it costs to have a baby in the United States? And they were saying, because there's no cost in the UK to have a child. And they were saying, oh, 100 pounds, 200 pounds, 500 pounds. And the equivalent 10,000 US dollars is about 8,000, 9,000 pounds.
Right.
No one guessed it. No one even came close. The amounts to just, it's unfathomable. So yeah, of course their systems have issues, and we can debate, and they can debate how much money should go in and what should the waiting list look like, but it's on a whole other planet compared to our medical system.
Well, our medical system, in my opinion, based on my experience with it since 2003 and my first heart attack, was when I really started getting involved in the medical system. It sucks, put it bluntly.
Yeah, it does. And it's only gotten very incrementally better since the Affordable Care Act was passed. Obviously, if you can afford an Affordable Care Act plan, and they're expensive, you can get one, and you can't be denied if you have a pre-existing condition.
Right.
But of course, when you require insurance companies cover everyone regardless of pre-existing conditions, that's going to mean they have to cover a lot of pre-existing conditions, and that will drive up costs.
Yeah, I understand.
You can't get away from that, right?
No, you can't get away from something costing something. You got to pay the piper somewhere along the line.
But what you can get away from, you can't get away from, if we have to cover these serious conditions, we're going to have to raise your costs. But what you can get away from is the profit. They obviously have to have money to cover care, but the profit is completely unnecessary. And that's what publicized public systems, that's how they're different. The UK has a single provider system. Other countries like France and Israel actually have private insurance companies, but they're incredibly highly regulated. So they're quasi-public, kind of like our utilities, right?
Yeah.
Electric companies in the US are usually private, but they're so highly regulated, it's almost like it's a public entity.
Right.
And that's how health insurance companies are in lots of Europe. They can exist, and they can pay their employees, and they make a very, very small, highly regulated amount of profit. But that's not how insurance companies are in the United States.
No.
So that's the part, that's where we're really overpaying, is not so much for the care, it's the profit.
It's the profit. Well, I'm a capitalist, so I don't have a problem with profit. I have a problem with excessive. When
right.
the public.
But the thing with capitalism is capitalism assumes several things: competition,
yep,
the ability to make choices, the ability to understand costs. Right. I was an economics major in college, and that's what we learned about. You learn about prices, you can compare, you can have competition to bring prices down. We don't have any of that with health insurance.
No.
Because you're told this is who your insurance company is, this is the premium, pay it, you don't have a choice, and then you go to file a claim and it gets denied. And it's not like you can say, well, I'll take my business elsewhere. You can't do that. It's not like restaurants where you can just not eat there ever again and go to the one across the street. So yeah, I understand what you're saying with capitalism, but all of the elements that make capitalism what it is, choice, information, the ability to compare and compete, none of that exists in our health insurance market.
No, it needs, in my opinion, I'd like to see some competition built in. I mean, insurance companies are limited by what states they can practice in, and all kinds of things. So write policies in different states, they can't do it. You can't, and I think it ought to be across the board.
Right, because if you could, like life insurance, you can buy across state lines, right? And so life insurance prices have actually been coming down the last decade. But the problem with health insurance is healthcare in Manhattan is very different from healthcare in Mobile, Alabama.
Yes.
So you can't just go buy a policy in Alabama if you live in Burbank, California. It just doesn't work the same way.
Well,
So as a federal employee, I had a federal policy, and that actually worked really well because federal employees from all over the country paid in. And so it was aggregated, and the risk pool was so big, it was almost like its own country. Like there's enough federal employees in that plan that there's like 4 times the number of people who live in Iceland just in that one plan.
Yeah.
So it's almost like its own little system. But the problem with competition overall is health insurance companies don't want to compete.
No.
It'd be better, instead of giving up money by competing, they'd rather give up less money by donating to political campaigns.
Right.
It costs them less, they make more profits, and they keep everything status quo.
And that's my problem with insurance companies. Is they don't want the competition. I mean, they don't have the political will to go to their congressman and say, stop the corruption and let's do what we're supposed to be doing here.
Yeah, and that's why a system like France has would actually be probably a really good system for our country, because, or Israel, because they have private insurance. It's just that there are 2 things. One, the private insurance companies are told, here are the things you must cover. And 2, they're told, beyond what you need to pay for care, here's the profit you're allowed to make. You care and operating expenses like your employees, and then this amount of profit. So they're still allowed to make a profit. It's just very restricted, and they're told that they have to cover certain things. And that's very different from our country, right? Where they're basically completely unregulated, and that's why no one knows, is this doctor in my insurance network? Is this procedure covered by my insurance? It's why insurance brochures are 200 pages. And you still read it and go, I don't know if this is covered. And then you go into something praying you're not going to get a massive bill afterwards.
Right.
That's not a good system.
No,
and because to bring it back to Social Security disability, because we have this terrible healthcare system, it's the same reason why we have a terrible public benefit system for all these other public benefits. And I don't think a UBI would really work to displace the current Social Security disability system without a public healthcare system. But these are all obviously very long-term things, right? That's not going to help a disability claimant today.
No.
So, or if you, as a Social Security recipient, somehow accidentally got paid too much and you had an overpayment claim today in 2022, thinking about how we might change the system in the future isn't going to help you. And that's why I wrote the book, because I want people to be able to dream about what the system could be in the future. But most of the book is actually about how to deal with the current system, how to navigate Social Security's complex rules and procedures so that you have plain language explanations that help inspire and empower you to feel like, I can do this. I'm not going to let these barriers that have been intentionally put there stop me from accessing benefits that I'm entitled to.
Right. That's the main thrust of the book, is helping people get through the system. Don't
get through the system. Yeah.
Not to beat the system, but to get through it.
Yeah, exactly. To work within the system, to understand. You can't beat the system, right? To help understand the system so that they can present the strongest possible case to Social Security for why they should get benefits, or if it's an overpayment situation, someone who's been paid and doesn't want to pay them back, the strongest possible case for why they should be able to keep those benefits.
Right.
I cover applications, I cover the hearing level if you get denied, I cover appeals, I cover child claimants, I cover overpayments. It's all in the book. And I cover evidence, because that's, for a lot of people, that's their biggest questions. I don't know what kind of evidence I need. I can't afford to go see a specialist. Where can I go to get the evidence that I need to prove my claim? And so that's what I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to help people understand the system and work within it to present the best possible case for getting the benefits they deserve.
The book, which, what was the title again?
Social Security.
Disability Revealed, why it's so hard to access benefits and what you can do about it. Was it available?
It's available on Amazon in ebook and paperback. It's also available through any other place you could possibly think of to get ebooks, such as Kobo, Scrib, Apple. It's available at Barnes and Noble. You can also go tell your library you want them to get it, and they can get it in ebook or paperback. So it's so many different ways to access this book, and you can find links to all of them at our website, bishinspublishing.com, BISHINS publishing.com. And we also have links to our social media there, a description of what's in the book, and I'll also put a link so people can listen to our interview.
Yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to post your below there, your introduction.
Yeah.
Made them right on in my show notes today, so they'll see that.
That's great. And then if they want a breakdown of the contents of the book, the website lists all the topics that we cover in the book.
Right. So I think that's going to be excellent. We got a few minutes yet, not a whole lot, because I've got a 2:45 physical therapy appointment.
All right. Well, go ahead.
Yeah. So you said your first book in here, which clearly indicates to me you're going to write a second book. What's it going to be, or are you doing it now?
No, I don't have any plans at the moment to write a second book. I worked for Social Security for 11 years, so this is the area of expertise that I developed, and this was the knowledge that I had, and I knew when I left that I wanted to write a book because I would see people's stories, right? I see their medical records, I see their application documents, I could listen to them testify at their hearings, and I could see how lost people felt. They didn't know where to go to get evidence, what type of evidence. They didn't understand the process, especially with people who didn't have a representative. People who come to a Social Security hearing and don't have a representative, you can just tell in their voice, they have no idea what's going on. And they're just basically hoping and praying that the judge sees things their way.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do something about that, to help people understand, okay, it's hard to find all of this information in one place. So I wanted to put it all in one place and create this book that explained the system, but that's also a reference, that's got a really good plain language glossary in the back, and one that people can understand. I've tried to write this book. I am a lawyer, but I tried to not write it to sound like I'm a lawyer. I wrote it really in very simple sentences, plain language. Here's the Social Security rule. Now here's what that actually means. And here's an example to help you better understand that. Because I want every claimant to be able to pick this up and say, that's what they mean. Why couldn't they have just said that? Now I get it. And now I understand. And once you understand something, you feel more empowered. Once you understand how a process works, you think, okay, I actually think I can do this now. That's part of the barrier that's put in place, is it's so those regulations are so complex, right? That people just throw their hands up in the air and say, what's the point? Well, I wanted people to understand they can understand what's going on and they can do this on their own. I don't know if I would write another book. I don't know what the topic of that book might be. It's possible I might write a book in the future about all the other public benefits programs. But at the moment, my focus is really on helping people understand Social Security disability, because it's a lot of people, right? It's over 1 million claimants every year. This is not a small program.
I do not know why I did not make the connection between 350 million people, and a lot of them are going to be retiring. 1 million a year, you say, or better.
Well, no, 1 million a year for disability.
Yeah. Oh,
So
just-
yeah, just for disability.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, of course, you have a lot of people moving into retirement age, but that's just people applying for disability. Not long ago, in about 2015, it was 2 million applications every year. And that was slightly before the baby boomers were hitting full retirement age.
Mhm.
And that's why it peaked. And the agency was just so overwhelmed. We were having crisis calls with headquarters where they were literally calling every hearing office and talking, using the word crisis. What do we do? We're getting so many more applications than we're capable of handling. And that has since come down, but still it's a lot of people.
Sure,
Again, because we don't have a great unemployment system. We don't have a great healthcare system. We don't have sick leave. And it just wears people out. The American worker just gets pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed until finally they break and they can't do it anymore. And that's why we have so many people turning to Social Security disability.
Yeah.
And those people need some guidance. And that's why I wrote the book. I wanted to give people the tools they need to succeed in this system.
Right. And I think it's an admirable thing. I love the idea of the book. I'm gonna try to get me a copy, depending on my finances next month. It won't be this month, it'll be next month, because I want to take a look at it. Because I got an Amazon account, so I can get it through Amazon pretty easy.
Yeah, or you can go ask your local library to obtain a copy, and they can get one for you.
Here's the sad news. I don't even know where the local library is.
Oh, okay.
I haven't been to a library in so many decades.
Yeah.
That's a problem. But no, I can't do it this month because I got other bills coming up. But Spencer, it has been an incredible adventure listening to you. I have learned a lot. I hope my listeners can learn a lot and will go out and buy the book. Give us the email address, not the email, but the book's website again. Sure.
It's Social Security Disability Revealed, Why It's So Hard to Access Benefits and What You Can Do About It. And the website is bishinspublishing.com.
Bishinspublishing.com. All right. I can go there.
Yes. All links to all the different places to buy the book right from our
I'm
website.
going to get the link and put it in with the show notes that I put in, so they'll have it right on the show notes.
Okay.
All right. So you have a magnificent day. Thank you again for so much. I enjoyed your stuff. I'm sure my listeners are going to enjoy it as well. I'm available all over where you can get podcasts, including iTunes and Spotify and SoundCloud and Amazon and YouTube. So I'm all over the place. So enjoy it. And
yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm very grateful to have you. And I should have this. We won't get it done today because I got to go to that PT thing, but I will get it done by the end of the week.
Okay.
And then it'll be uploaded, and you can find me at Coffee Time Again, coffee-time-again.com, and there's a link to my show website right there.
All right,
so
sounds good.
Again, Spencer, and have a magnificent time and enjoy your time off. And if you decide to write a book, get a hold of me. I'll be around.
All right. Thank you.
You betcha. Bye.